Well, this is Betting Weekly Extra Time Champions League edition. You're with myself, Dan Roebuck, and over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, with the help of senior handicapper Steve Wyss and professional football bettor Will White, we aim to identify the value plays post the draw for the last 16 of Europe's premier club competition. And we'll also dip our toes into the waters of the Europa League and indeed the Europa Conference Leagues as well, following the news of the knockout round playoff draws in those respective competitions as well. Steve, 6 of the 8 groups were won by the favourites when it comes to the Champions League this season. In terms of qualification, only Manchester United and Newcastle missing out on the knockout stages was perhaps a little bit of a surprise if we just go on the betting. I mean, so far, it's been good for favourite backers.
Well, yes, good day to you, Dan and Will. And, this show is all about the early bird catching the worm, so to speak. We want to get some value in early before these Champions League and Europa League matches start back up in mid-February. It was a good group stage in general for the favourites, like you say. And the Newcastle, the interesting one. That wasn't a shock to me that they didn't qualify, but I would have been interested if they managed to stay pretty healthy during that period, because I think injuries are a legitimate excuse for them. Man United were just a mess, weren't they? There's always one team that lets everyone down as such, but they became so bad that I think everyone was actually on the lookout, Dan. We even profited at times, didn't we? So, look, this is why the format is changing next year, because it's become too easy for some of these big teams.
Top 4 in the betting, Will, are all shorter in terms of price than they were ahead of match day 1 of the group stages. I mean, it maybe goes to show that there is some value in the futures market. I think some bettors might dismiss it and just say, well, I'm not going to back them now because XYZ team, City, Bayern, whoever, are going to be about the same sort of price. And we know they're going to make it through, as those stats suggest. But there is some value, I think, to try and identify some plays a few months ahead of the game.
Yeah, even PSG, who didn't top the group, ended up shortening in price, and they'd actually shortened before they'd qualified from the group. So obviously there's an element of these teams getting through the group stages safely, and there's some percentage probability that you've got to assign to that. But there's such a thing as well as favourite long shot bias that's been proven to be evident in betting markets. And so I think a lot of the margin from the shorter priced, bigger priced teams, if that makes any sense, has been taken out now for the teams that haven't qualified from the group stages. And so, it's inevitable that those big teams will shorten in price, even though it seemed initially that it would be completely obvious that they would get through the group stages.
I just want to get your opinions on the market leaders when it comes to the Champions League. And we'll get some plays as well as we go. And we'll get some thoughts on those round of 16 clashes. But City, Steve, first of all, plus 225 into plus 200. I mean, in different league form of late, but they are sure to win the Champions League. And they've got a great draw, haven't they, really?
They're actually plus 185 now. And, at the time of recording, which is knocking on the door of Christmas, I would much rather back Manchester City to win the Champions League than the Premier League myself. Let's be honest here. Apologies to FC Copenhagen fans, but Man City, they're into the quarterfinals, aren't they? They're not going to get knocked out by FC Co. I think the Danish side are 18-1 to qualify for the quarterfinals. So it's an easy draw. And, City are the defending champions of Europe, of the Champions League. Historically, this was a very tough competition to win back-to-back, but Real Madrid kind of changed that narrative. So they're absolutely the deserving favourites, A, because they're a damn good side, and they're going to have some key players back fit by then, and B, they've got by far the easiest draw because FC Copenhagen are the lowest ranked side left in this competition now.
Got a history of lucky draws, I think, haven't they, under Pep Guardiola? Will, is there any value at all in plus 185 as it is now? Or is it just, look, they've got an easy draw as far as I'm concerned? Yes, they're most likely winners, but I'm going to leave it alone for now.
I think the plus 185 is a little bit short, to be honest with you. My fair value would probably be around 2 plus 225. So I think the 185 is a little bit short. I think they are deserved favourites, but I think there are question marks, and probably more question marks this season than there were last. Kevin De Bruyne looks like he's recovered from his injury. He's training now with City out in the World Club Championships. So he's likely to be back, but whether he can recapture his form and how quickly he can do that is a question mark. Erling Haaland's got an injury, probably going to be back. I think he's out in the World Championships with City and not training currently, but he's likely to be back quite soon. Those two guys are key to them, right? Along with Rodri, probably their three key players, three key pieces. I personally think that the outright market currently is being priced quite accurately. I don't really see much value, but we'll move on to the other teams in a little bit. Bottom line with City, deserved favourites, but a little bit too short.
Give us your thoughts on Bayern then, Will, here, because they were a play that you liked at the start of the Champions League. They were plus 550. They're plus 400 now. They take on Lazio. I mean, you're happy with your play? Would you get involved again?
Not at plus 400, no. The plus 550, I think, was the original tip price. And they've come in a lot for not much, right? For qualifying top of the group that they should have topped anyway. They haven't been entirely convincing this season. They've kind of been overshadowed by Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. They've had a lot of issues with fitness and injuries. They really need to strengthen central midfield. They'll probably bring in João Palhinha over the winter break. The winter break is a big factor, I think, and a big thing that plays into their favor. And we talked about that preseason. Yeah, probably not plus 400, but I do have them rated as the second strongest team in Europe, just ahead of Arsenal and behind City, obviously. So I think the market's got them about right.
Steve, anything to add with Bayern?
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about this. If you ask me who do I actually think will win the Champions League, then I'd probably go with Bayern Munich. Doesn't mean I'd back them, but I think they're probably the likely winner. What is interesting is for the first time in ages, really, apart from last season, but in a year where they would expect to challenge for the Champions League, they're actually going to be involved probably in a title race, maybe till the bitter end. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because at times I've seen Bayern and PSG have had this problem as well, where they're cruising so much domestically. They come to a big Champions League game and they just haven't got enough in their tank because they're not used to facing such tough games or intense games. So I think logically you'd rather be 10, 15 points clear though, wouldn't you? So I don't know whether it's a negative that they're probably going to be embroiled in this title race with Leverkusen.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one because when you look at Real Madrid, and I don't know the points differences when they've won titles or when Barcelona have won titles, but obviously they push each other domestically, Will. And Real Madrid are arguably in the best form domestically of the top three in the Champions League betting here. They won all 6 of their Group C games, and they've got Leipzig as well here. I mean, they're plus 600 from plus 800. There seems to be a lot of ticks in the right boxes for Real Madrid, and that's not even mentioning, historically that they've got the job done so often.
Yeah, Real Madrid for me are a team where I battle between kind of my head and my heart, I guess, or more accurately put, my model and my human instincts of watching football and understanding football. My model doesn't really like Real Madrid. Their underlying data is not that great. They just get the job done, and they've got that star quality. They've got the Champions League experience, obviously, and they've got Vinicius coming back to fitness probably in next month. I wouldn't want to be against Real Madrid, but I couldn't back them at this price, given that my model makes them closer to plus 800, plus 900. So I couldn't get involved for that reason.
Is that your model, or is it your Barca bias here, Will? Come on, be honest.
It's my model, but we'll move on to Barca. I'm not sure if we're going to be discussing Barca themselves, but believe it or not, Barca's underlying data is stronger than Real Madrid's this season, and yet they're at least double the price.
Well, I was going to ask you, Will, right? Plus 550 Real Madrid, plus 1400 Barcelona. That's a huge gap.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the reason for that? Because I know Real Madrid at the minute have been the better team slightly, but that seems an insane gulf.
I think it's purely based off. It's based off form. It's based off position in La Liga, and it's based off the Champions League winning experience that Real Madrid have. Nobody wants to be against Real Madrid in the Champions League, do they? No. Whereas Barca are just seen as being more vulnerable at the moment, and I think there is some truth to that. Like the eye test is, would give you more concerns about Barcelona than Real Madrid, but Real have a lot of injuries as well, right? They lost David Alaba.
I've got a big problem with their injuries long term. There's about 3 or 4 players are done for the season, right? along those lines. There's only so much you can do in the transfer market to counteract that. I mean, the latest one, like you say, Alaba, the keeper's done all year. Can I imagine, Real Madrid ultimately, semi-finals, finals, doing it with that squad? I don't know. They've got Bellingham, who might be the best player in the world. But
I think for me, really, I mean, now that we're getting into it, I'm starting to think that the likely winner of the Champions League is going to have to get a bit of luck when it comes to injuries. There have been so many injuries this season. Like this, it seems like the schedule and the physicality and the speed of football is really starting to take its toll on the number of players that are getting injured, and I think that's likely to have a big role to play in the likely progression of teams in this tournament. Because
as I was going to say, as you just mentioned, Barcelona, and they have had injuries earlier this season, and they're plus 1,400 or so bigger, as Steve was pointing out. Well, I mean, are you suggesting? Are they a play for you now? What sort of price do they need to be? Has the draw been factored in with Barcelona, Napoli, and Real Madrid? Of course, have got Leipzig. Is that an easier draw for Real Madrid? I mean, Napoli are no great shakes at the moment.
I think on the face of it, the market is thinking that Napoli are a better team than Leipzig, and therefore it's an easier draw for Real Madrid. But I don't see it that way. I mean, I'm just have a quick glance at my ratings. I've actually got Leipzig as the better team than Napoli. So that's just my thinking. But I think the market is definitely factoring that in, and kind of it's just another reason to be against Barca, or kind of let them fly under the radar a little bit in terms of likely winner.
Let's just ask you about some other teams. Steve, Arsenal, we talk about injuries. They've been pretty good. Their squad is stronger. There's no doubt about that. They had a pretty easy group. It was a group that looked a bit Europa League-ish, and they came through it okay, despite an early defeat away at Lens, and obviously going well in the Premier League. Are they better equipped? I mean, they're plus 600 from plus 1,200, and the draw, according to the market makers, has been kind to them because they've halved in price.
They'll get past Porto. I'd be surprised if they don't do that, but I just think the priority for Arsenal is the Premier League. Mikel Arteta, they're desperate to end that drought in the Premier League. And I think if it come the end of the season, it could be quite intense if they're involved in both competitions. They're not used to this. This is the first year they've been back in the Champions League in 5-6 years. It's a lot different to being involved in Europa League last time out. Arsenal, the way they play, I've just got a feeling they will get some injuries in the last few months of the season. It happened last year. Saliba missed the last 6-7 games, a couple of others as well. I think a big thing with Arsenal is the transfer window, though, because if they can get in, say, an Ivan Toney or another midfielder, then they've added a lot more depth there. So I actually think plus 600 is about fair on Arsenal Football Club. They're not. I'm more looking at them in the Premier League though, Dan, than the Champions League.
Will, quick thought on Arsenal.
Kind of the reverse of Real Madrid. Model loves them, has them higher rated than Real Madrid, but it's hard to back them given the lack of Champions League experience, at least at the recent latter stages, compared to a team like Real Madrid. So yeah, it's a reverse for me.
Atleti have drawn Inter, both prominent in the market. Atleti have gone out quite a bit, even though they were pretty good in qualification. I'm going to ask Will about Atleti. I'll ask Steve about Inter. We can have a chat about those two because they're drawn together. Just on Atleti, first of all, Will, we've sort of talked on some of the preview shows as to whether they are as good as, or sometimes maybe even better than Barcelona. Barcelona are great when they beat Atleti not so long ago. Where do you stand with Atleti from a Champions League point of view?
I quite like Atleti. They've come in a lot though, haven't they, in price? And so, what price are they currently now?
Well, no, they've gone out. They were unless I've scribbled it. Yeah,
I misread the notes.
Yeah, I think it's simply because of the draw, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the prices, both Atleti and Inter actually look quite big to me, but that's probably because they're playing each other.
Yeah.
Who's favourites for this tie? I'd probably have Inter as very slight favourites.
Yeah, market says that.
But yeah, Atleti certainly wouldn't want to oppose them at plus 2,500.
Steve, what do you think on Inter? Because I know that you like Inter. This is one of the plays that you've put up specifically for this podcast. So talk us through why you like them and why you think they're going to get beyond Atleti, first of all.
Yeah, I said, I think, on the last Champions League show that Inter Milan was starting to catch my eye at 20-1. At that stage, I expected them to win the group. So for them to finish second and draw Atletico Madrid, I think that's a result. It's not an easy draw, but they'd much rather that than say Man City or someone else like that. So if they can get past Atletico Madrid, then 20-1 looks a big price on a team which is easily the best side in Italy right now. I think they'll win Serie A this season. It looks like they're in a race with Juventus, but I think they'll probably get that done with 4 or 5 rounds remaining. So it's a perfect sort of concoction, really. They're fighting hard for a long time, and then come the crunch stage, they might be able to rest some players and focus on Champions League. They've got good pedigree in this competition recently, finalists last season. So yeah, I've been really impressed with them. When they, it might actually help that they'll be able to field their strongest 11 every week as well now in the Champions League rather than this rotation thing. So 20-1 plus 2,000, Dan. I think it's worth a go on the nose for Inter in this Champions League.
And one other team that I'll get both your thoughts on, because we've talked about them a lot on the Champions League show, is Paris Saint-Germain. They didn't win their group, only qualified on match day 6. Steve, I'll go with you first because you're more across the fence before I get Will's thoughts. I mean, what do we think of PSG? I sort of put it to James the other day. It's like, they've had a tougher group. Will that toughen them up a little bit? I mean, would you want to back them at around about plus 1,300? Will mentioned at the top of the show that they've actually come in a bit, even though they only finished second. Their draw to Sociedad to La Real is an interesting one, which we'll get to shortly. But just PSG outright for you.
James Eastham said he didn't fancy PSG to win the Champions League now, so that'll do me, Dan. I backed him. I backed him bigger price pre groups. But I just think they've shown too many frailties in that group. Really, really worrying frailties. They didn't win away from home, and they just seemed overawed by some of these atmospheres and things like that. I've just got a question if they've mentally got it. That is a big mental problem.
Where do you, on your rating, where are Paris Saint-Germain? I mean, with the market here, we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They are 7th best in. Are they? Or are they? No, they're not 7th. They're 5th. They're 5th best in. They're 5th favourites for the Champions League. Does that sit right with the numbers you've got?
I remember we talked about this pre-group stage, and I believe I had PSG 13th best team in Europe at the time, and that was including the non-Champions League teams, right? So the likes of Leverkusen, Liverpool. If you include Leverkusen and Liverpool, I've got them 9th best rated team in Europe. If you take Liverpool and Bayern out, I've got them 7th best team in Europe. So, they've moved up 5 or 6 places in my ratings, and that's just really based off their domestic form more than anything. I think they're probably priced about right now, but then if I think about it, I just don't fancy PSG in the latter stages of the Champions League based off what Steve was talking about earlier and the fact that, are there really the teams in Ligue 1 that can push them to the levels they need to be pushed to kind of, be in that City-like zone where they're just ready to go 2 or 3 times a week? I don't think so. But I think with Bayern, although you could argue that it's a similar kind of thing with Bayern and Bundesliga, not this season though, but Bayern, for whatever reason, it's an advantage for them, but it's a disadvantage for PSG. So I don't know why that is. Probably something to do with just the culture of the club or the kind of the way that the teams are managed. But yeah, PSG, I couldn't back them, but I think their price is about fair.
Anyone else you should mention in the futures for the outright Champions League, Steve, Will? Anyone else that you want to mention quickly or not? Do you think the winner will come from the top? Go on.
I'd say 2 prices which could look big. I don't think they're going to win it or even probably make the semi-final. But PSV are 150-1 with Bet Rivers. I think they've got every chance of making the quarterfinals. And we just talked about them there. Real Sociedad plus 6,600, 66-1 shot, Dan. They're not without a chance against PSG. I could see it now. PSG dominating Liga heading into this game. Everyone's saying, they're back. They're going to be serious this year. And then they come back down to earth when actually a half-decent team faces them.
Will, anyone else outside of what we've talked about?
I like PSV. PSV at plus 1,500 is just way too big.
It's 15,000 even. Is it 15,000?
15,000. Yeah, 150-1, right?
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous price. I mean, talking about who are the top form teams in Europe at the moment? PSV are the best team, the best in-form team in Europe at the moment. And my ratings have kind of not really reflected that narrative, but they're certainly in the top 14, 15 teams in Europe, including the teams that are not in the Champions League currently. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit disrespectful, that price. I think they're favourites to get through against Dortmund as well.
We're going to rattle through the to qualify prices shortly. So we've added Inter to our portfolio. Will is already on Bayern. We talked about City and all the rest of the top of the market as well. So make of that what you will. Just very quickly, just a very brief word. Top goal scorer. I know that bettors like to get involved. Haaland, Steve, plus 100. He's got 5 goals. Kane's got 4 plus 225. Mbappe's got 3 plus 600. Bellingham's got 4 plus 1400. Jesus for Arsenal plus 2500. He's got 4. Morata plus 1100. Anything that you want to say about goal scorers at the moment for the outright, Steve?
Yeah, how much of a shock is it that 2 Atletico Madrid players are joint top of the Golden Boot race after the group
Griezmann's
stage?
Got 5 as well.
Do you know what I'll say, Dan? Right, think about Haaland. He's someone that often has to be wrapped in cotton wool. Now, they could completely obliterate Copenhagen in the first leg, and he gets rested the second leg. I personally backed him myself just before the group stages, but I actually think Julian Alvarez is an interesting price for City. He's always a reliable player. He stays fit. He'll be on penalties if Haaland's not around. I think if Haaland doesn't stay fit, then that's a big price. But I think there's a few of us on Kane, isn't there, in the outright show? So hopefully Harry Kane can go deep and strong.
Will, anything to add, goal scorer, as we stand going into the round of 16?
What I would say is Kane has contracted more in price than Haaland has, despite Haaland leading the race by 1 goal over Kane. So I think, the market is factoring in the fact that Haaland's currently injured, likely to be back soon, but what Steve says about kind of having to wrap him in cotton wool. At the same time, they do have, on the face of it, a very easy draw. And I actually think if you were against Haaland pre-group stages, you probably look to be covering about now, because I think he probably should have. I personally believe he was slightly too short pre-group stages, and now he's probably about right. But yeah, those would be my thoughts, really.
Even money at the minute. We've got 3 picks in the to qualify, so I'm just going to get to the 3 picks because we've talked about the other teams. Will, you can go first. Leipzig against Real Madrid. I say we've got 3 picks. We've got 4 because the boys have doubled up on 1. Will, Leipzig, Real Madrid, what's the play here?
I quite like the outsider here. At plus 250 at the time of recording. We've got the 4th best team in Europe versus the 8th best team in Europe, according to my ratings. And I just think the price looks a little bit too big and probably should be closer to plus 200. But then looking at the opening match prices as well, I think maybe the better way in here would be to look to get with Leipzig in the home leg plus kind of quarter of a goal or something like that. But both look like plays to me. I think Leipzig are flying under the radar a little bit. They've kind of been overshadowed by Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. They've been overshadowed by City in their Champions League group. But the underlying metrics are very strong. We've spoken about the weapons they have in the likes of Lois Openda and Xavi Simons. Real Madrid, obviously, they're a juggernaut and really, really tough to oppose, especially in this tournament. But as I said earlier on, I actually have Barca, kind of their underlying data suggests they're slightly the better team in La Liga. And so, yeah, I mean, Leipzig plus 250, it's just slightly too big for me.
We stick with a Bundesliga side. Both are going for the same thing. I'll let Steve talk first. This is PSV against Dortmund. And you're both going for, you talked about PSV, but Steve, just give us another line on this one.
Plus 120 to qualify PSV against Dortmund, which I think is too big. It should be a pick 'em really at best. At the time, PSV have been 100% record domestically heading into Christmas. That might not be the case come the new year, but you can't ignore that sort of form. It's not a terrible league these days. Feyenoord are a pretty decent side. So I think PSV have had a nice draw here. I said on the last couple of shows, Dortmund are the team you wanted to get if you were finishing second, really. They don't convince me this season, Dan. And I don't really think they ever will. They'd have to do some pretty damn good business in January to get me on their side this season. Borussia Dortmund.
Okay. Will, you like the same play, basically?
Yeah.
Anything to add to add in terms of any numbers or anything? Any more opinion?
I mean, if just talking about the best form teams in Europe, I mean, 16 from 16 in Eredivisie so far this season, 56 goals scored, 6 conceded. I mean, that's outrageous. And if you look at kind of historical Eredivisie side ratings, you know, the Ajax of a few years ago that were, you know, going off very short prices in Champions League versus teams like Dortmund, PSV are at that level now. And I'm kind of having to increase the range of my ratings to allow for their dominance. And so we're two teams that are on very different trajectories. Normally, I'd be looking to take kind of contrarian view to a matchup like this, but I just think I was expecting PSV to be favourites here, and at plus 120, it's way too big.
And one other play when it comes to effectively making the quarterfinals here. This is in the Paris Saint-Germain Real Sociedad fixture. And Will, you've got to play here. You're going for the outsider again.
Yeah. I was hoping for bigger than plus 150. I put it in our group WhatsApp.
Yes, you did. You wanted plus 200, didn't you?
But I was getting a bit greedy, and when I looked at the prices and I had to think about it, I still want to have them on side at plus 150. Despite the kind of respectful comments from El Khalifi and Marquinhos about, you know, how they respected and rated this Real Sociedad side, I think they might be underestimating them quietly, and I think they're in for a rude awakening. As we know, Real Sociedad topped their group, a tough group with a very impressive Inter Milan. PSG were very unconvincing and scraped through in the end. My model does have PSG the higher rated team by quite a little bit as well. But I personally don't think there's much between these two teams. And on our own, Rory Barlow tweeted out how you couldn't have drawn two more opposing clubs when it comes to models, ideologies, and owners. And I fancy the kind of more academy-focused, understated, and perhaps fiscally responsible team to get the job done. It's quite big underdogs here.
Very, very quickly, I just want one-word answers here. Who goes through, Steve? City, Copenhagen? Are we saying City, Steve?
Manchester City.
Yeah, Will?
Yeah, definitely City.
Lazio, Bayern? We're saying Bayern, Will?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Steve, any shock there? No.
Bayern München.
Inter Atleti. I mean, Inter you like, obviously. Inter Atleti for you, Will? You say Inter go through on that one?
This is the closest tie on paper, isn't it? And one of the ones I'm really looking forward to watch, actually. Guns ahead, I'd be with Inter, but you can never count out a Simeone Atleti team. It's going to be
Simeone derby as well, isn't it? Porto Arsenal. We all think Arsenal.
Yeah.
Nods.
For me,
yes. And Napoli, Barcelona. Napoli plus 137. Barcelona minus 188. Any thoughts on that one? Very quickly. Who do you think is going to go through? Doesn't
Barcelona for me, Dan. Barcelona get the job done there.
Yeah. Will.
Yeah, Barca for me too, and I think it's been priced about right. I was hoping for a bigger price on Barca, maybe a -1 kind of 37, -140 kind of price. But yeah, unfortunately, it's been priced quite well.
Added to the portfolio, both Steve and Will like PSV to qualify at plus 120. Will likes La Real to beat Paris Saint-Germain over the two legs at plus 150. And also, Leipzig, we're taking a flyer against Real Madrid at plus 250 to add to our Champions League futures bets. We're going to dip into the Europa League and to the Conference League as well. Europa League futures look like this. Liverpool plus 225, Leverkusen plus 500, Milan plus 1100, West Ham plus 1400, same price about Brighton. Roma a bit bigger. 9 winners, Steve, have dropped from the Champions League to win the Europa League. 24 seasons that they've dropped down now. So it's a fair percentage that have done it. I mean, the Champions League teams, Steve, have got an extra game because they are dropping down. If you won your Europa League group, you're straight into the round of 16. It's slightly different, as we know, for the Europa League and the Conference League. I mean, how big is that, do you think, in terms of Liverpool and Leverkusen, not just winning it, but just in terms of their price as well? What's your sort of angle on the teams dropping down and the teams that have topped their Europa League group and the market as it is?
Well, obviously, you'd much rather be in the last 16, wouldn't you? So that's why they're short of price. I think Europa League's quite tough this year because the two market leaders, Liverpool, I still have to question: are they really that bothered about this? You know, if they got into a deep Premier League title race battle.
I've asked that question every single time we've covered the Europa League, and you boys keep telling me that, and I'll probably be asking it ahead of the final as well. But anyway, go on.
So, there's that side with Liverpool. Leverkusen are actually similar. Might end up being involved in this Bundesliga title race, which slightly makes me worried for Will's brilliant 20-1 pre-season tip, which I think we're going to have to add to the portfolio now, aren't we, Dan, now that we're into Europa League?
Well, it was mentioned at the start.
Well, it was mentioned more than once, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, Leverkusen, I think, from that value price, are a good one. But I think it's tough, Europa League, because you've got to identify teams that want it. Some teams just genuinely do switch off for this event.
Will, you tipped up Leverkusen, and we've talked about them a bit, but are you suggesting that bettors should be adding Liverpool at this stage of the tournament now?
Not really. I'm more suggesting that they are the correct favourites. Based off ratings, we don't know how seriously they're going to take it. A lot of it will depend on their progress in the Premier League and how that shapes up further into the latter parts of the season. But has their price contracted at all? I believe they were plus 250. Were they pre?
Yes, I've not scribbled it down, so
they're around about the same price, and I don't think we've really got much evidence to base any change of opinion on. So I think they're fair favourites. Obviously, Leverkusen have contracted a lot, but that's because the market and really all of Europe has woken up to just how good this Xabi Alonso team is. I wouldn't be backing them at plus 500 though. But I have identified, and I believe Steve has too, some much bigger price, interesting teams.
Yeah. Okay. So these are sort of official plays that we're going to add to the betting slip. Steve, you can go first. Big price outsider for you. When I say big price outsider, I mean there's some big price outsiders pretty much after the top two, isn't it here? But who do you like?
I'm going to have a go with Lens at 40-1. Now, the interesting thing with Lens' price is that they're really varied across the board, actually. Some books have them as short as 16-1. So I don't think the books necessarily know quite what to think of them. But there was a few teams I looked at here. I looked at the likes of Benfica, Atalanta, even Villarreal. I'm trying to identify teams where this competition becomes the priority come sort of March time. I just think with Lens, this has been their first year back in Europe for a long time. We saw how they embraced the Champions League group. That the Bollard Stadium was absolutely rocking. They beat Arsenal there. He's the old adage, it's a tough place to go. And I think the fans are going to be right behind them. I think they've got a nice draw. They should get past Freiburg. I don't really rate Freiburg too much. So Lens should be getting through that one. And then, let's see where the luck of the draw takes them. But I do know they'll be absolutely bang up for it. And they'll be giving it their all. And I don't see how it goes into the back burner compared to the league, because this might be it will be probably their best chance of silverware unless they have a good run in the Coupe de France. And, underlying that's for me still one of the best 3 or 4 sides in France. So I'll have a go with Lens and see what sort of ride they can take.
Lens dropped down for the Champions League, as did Will's big price fancy. Will?
Yeah, I really like Feyenoord here, plus 4,000. I think this has been priced up purely based off the fact they've got a difficult draw against Roma, but it's they've been priced. I mean, my ratings have Feyenoord on a similar level to the likes of Brighton, who are plus 1,400, so a third of the price, and AC Milan, who are plus 1,100, so a quarter of Feyenoord's price here. And at the same time, my ratings have them as better than the likes of Roma, West Ham, Benfica, Galatasaray, Villarreal, certainly, who are all shorter in the betting. So I think this just been mispriced, and I think it's another example of an Eredivisie team, being underestimated. And if you look at the Eredivisie, there are only 18 teams in that league, so that's 34 matches in a season as opposed to 38 or even more for other leagues. And so I think you can pretty much guarantee that Feyenoord are going to be up for this. So yeah, I really like that pick at plus 4.
That might become their priority as well, Will, because PSV should win the league from here.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of history at Feyenoord Roma. The two manager matchup.
Yeah,
a manager matchup as well.
Is this the third season on the spin? They're going to play each other.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Feyenoord finally going to get the better of Jose Mourinho. I mean, this is probably as good a chance, isn't it?
Because they were beaten in the final, weren't they? Was it the original Conference League final?
I think they'll get them on the cards. They'll get on the cards in those games.
Yeah. We have got some to qualify picks as well. Just following on from that, just let us know the price of Feyenoord to beat Roma, Will, and this is the value play in your eyes over the two legs.
Yeah, I'm just actually trying to have a quick look to see if I can find the odds for the previous encounters between these two. Just having it. Yeah, so Roma were favourites when they met last season in Europa League, but I just think this Feyenoord team has improved so much in the last year, and I would argue that the Roma team has regressed. So, I just think the plus 120. I think we've got the wrong favourites here. I think Roma are very reliant on Paulo Dybala, Romelu Lukaku, and Pellegrini, club captain. They're all injury prone. Well, maybe not Lukaku so much this season, but if they lose one or two of those, I think Feyenoord would be massive favourites for this. So obviously it's a contrast in styles. It's a massive contrast in terms of managerial approach, and there's a big rivalry here. I do fancy Feyenoord to get the job done. Yeah.
Plus 120, and you've got a parlay for us. Rattle through this for us. You've got 4 teams to qualify. Will?
Yeah, I just think I think I've identified some favourites here that should be much stronger favourites, and I think there's a gulf between the calibre of the teams. The first is Sporting Club de Portugal to qualify versus Young Boys. I think there's an absolute gulf between the quality of those sides. I don't know why Young Boys seem to be overrated. AC Milan to qualify versus Rennes. I think there's more of a gulf than the market is factoring in there too. Obviously, you've got a bit of a question mark with Milan as to how seriously they're going to take this competition. But if you don't consider that as such a large factor, let's assume that they will take it seriously. They've been priced far too big, in my opinion. I think the market is perhaps factoring in that they're not going to make it a priority. But the third leg is Benfica to go through versus Toulouse. Far more of a European pedigree there. My ratings have them at least half a goal better. And then Galatasaray to go through versus Sparta Prague. That's the biggest price of the 4. But I think worth throwing in just because, according to my ratings, and I think most people would agree, that there's quite a gulf in quality between those two. I know I mentioned Sparta as a potential pick in the final, or maybe the penultimate group stage show we did, where they were a huge price. But for some reason, I think Gala are just a little bit too big here. And those 4, if you combine them in a parlay, comes in at plus 350. So, a 28% chance implied of those 4 teams going through. I think that's way too low.
I love that. We're like Sporting, Milan, Benfica, Galatasaray, all to make the next round at plus 350, the parlay. Let's get to Conference Corner. Europa Conference League futures like this. Aston Villa plus 300, Fiorentina plus 600, Eintracht Frankfurt plus 900, Lille plus 1100, Ajax plus 1300, same price as Real Betis, Fenerbahce plus 1400. Roma and West Ham, previous 2 winners, Steve, both started in the Conference League. Ajax, Real Betis are the top ones there in the market, have come down from the Europa League. What are your thoughts on the Conference League, and give us your play?
Yeah, I think Ajax are the interesting side, aren't they? Because how good can they become after a January transfer window? I think probably their ceiling is higher than most there. So I don't know. They've got an interest. I'm really pleased with the draw. Ajax against one of my favourite teams, Buda Glimt. So they've got to go better to the Arctic Circle. But it's usually great. Getting a Norwegian team is a good one this time of year because they're just not match fit by then. So I think Ajax should get through that all right. And then let's see. I quite like Will's favourite backer winner that he's going to talk about soon. It's an obvious one, but I do like that. But I'm going to have a nibble at the other Turkish team here, Fenerbahce at plus 1400. I think the Turkish, I mentioned it a few times, Turkish football, I think it's on the rise. It's improving again. Both themselves and Galatasaray are going really well at the top of that Turkish league right now. And, I think Galatasaray are the better side, but Fenerbahce are not that far behind. They just squeezed through the group, actually. They didn't. I'm surprised they didn't win the group. But I think plus 1,400 for a side which has shown that it's got a lot of goals in it may well be worth getting involved in, to be honest with you, Dan. I think just offers a bit of value.
Plus 1,400 Fenerbahce, we like. Have you got 2 picks, or are you just suggesting, Will, that the market principles are the most likely winners?
Yeah, good question, Dan, and I'm not really sure myself, to be honest.
Will Villa talk us through Villa first of all, then? Plus 300, do you think that's the fair price? I guess that's what you're saying here, or not?
I think it might be a little bit big, but there's a big caveat on how seriously are they going to approach this, given their involvement in certainly a Champions League race in the Premier League and potentially even a title race in the Premier League. So probably wouldn't be that keen to back them, but I think it's a backable price for anybody that is interested. And just even if you look at ratings, I've got Villa as the 14th best team in Europe. And the next best favourites, so second favourites, Fiorentina, 44th best team in Europe. Eintracht's 64th best team in Europe. So there's an absolute gulf in terms of the quality of the favourite and the second and third favourites here. And the market is clearly quite wary of how seriously Villa are going to be approaching this. Yes, they did rotate their lineup for the group stage games, but not massively, The teams were still strong and they've got a very deep squad. So I wouldn't put anyone off backing them at plus 300. Probably wouldn't back them myself at that price.
I think we've got to predict what's going to happen with Villa, haven't we? Because just say the likelihood is that they get eliminated from the actual title race and they're embroiled in a top 4 battle. If you're an Aston Villa fan or whatever, would you rather finish 4th or win the Conference League? Are they going to take a trophy? 4th. No, they'll take the trophy all day. No way. Are you serious?
I'd say ridiculous. 4th. I'd say 4th.
Are you serious?
No, I think if you're a Villa fan, you'd want to see your side in the Champions League for the first time ever. I know they won the old European Cup.
When was the last trophy they won?
I don't know. League Cup, was it? Was it League Cup?
Yeah, 96 against Leeds, I think.
I think they would rather see their side.
Wow.
Will?
I'm going to have to adjudicate on this, and Dan, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think
they have to play Champions League.
I can't believe that. Trophy all day long.
Will,
give us your bigger price runner here that you like.
Another favourite of the show, Union Saint-Gilloise, plus 2,500. Going to need to have a chat with the Bet Rivers odds compilers here to see their rationale as to why they see USG on a similar level to the likes of PAOK Thessalonica, Victoria Pilsen, Maccabi Haifa, and particularly Slovan Bratislava. Just a gulf in quality, and in my eyes, between USG and those teams, I think they're just a little bit too big. Let me just have a quick check of the old ratings, because I wouldn't be surprised if I actually have them too far. Yeah, so I've got them kind of in the same ballpark as the likes of Eintracht Frankfurt, and not that far below Fiorentina. So yeah, that 2,500 in my view should be about half the price.
Okay, good stuff. That's Union Saint-Gilloise. We like them at 25-1. And very quickly, Will, you've got 3 teams that you like to qualify here. We're not parlaying these up, but you've got 3 to make it through. Just rattle through those for us.
Yeah, as singles, I really like these. Olympiacos minus 110 to go through versus Ferencváros. Olympiacos, they've got quite the European pedigree. They're only 4th in the Greek league, but only 1 point off top and clear second in terms of my Greek ratings. I just think there's a bit of a gulf in quality between these two, and I'd have Olympiacos much close to minus 150, maybe even lower than that. They were in quite a tough group, performed quite well against West Ham in the Europa League. Yeah, I quite like Olympiacos there. Real Betis minus 125 versus Dinamo Zagreb. Obviously, you've got a La Liga team playing a Croatian team here. Dinamo lost a lot of their star players, let's say, over the summer. And at the end of the day, you've got quite a good upper middle table La Liga team playing Croatian champions here. I know Dinamo have a European pedigree, but I think Betis should be favourites, pretty strong favourites to go through there. And then Union Saint-Gilloise plus 163 to go through versus Eintracht Frankfurt. 2 equal teams according to my ratings, and I'm happy to back them at almost 2-1. That just seems way, way too big for me.
We like Olympiacos, Real Betis, and Union Saint-Gilloise all to qualify for the next stage, which will, of course, be the round of 16. Of course, these are the knockout playoffs, as they're called, according to UEFA. So we've got you covered with the Champions League, with the Europa League, and, of course, the Conference League. Steve, Will, thanks for your company. We'll look forward to reconvening in February to see what the market has done to your picks and to whether you might want to change anything. For now, though, that is a wrap for Betting Weekly Extra Time Champions League edition. Plenty more content over the Christmas period as well. Make sure you're across all of the Bet Rivers shows by subscribing to our YouTube channel and by staying in touch on social media at Because We Win. From all of us for now, though, it is goodbye.